Okay, you know what that is? That's me doing a happy dance. Okay, I woke up this morning. I couldn't decide what to do. I went to my sewing room and after I had my coffee, and I started looking at the pages that I made in the Kelly may-krenz class. And you know, I made the pages, which are in here, and I made this cover to put them in, which was too big. So I thought to myself, I made another, okay, so I started to make a new cover, and which would be the third attempt at making a cover for these particular pages. And when I made the little mock-up, or you know, started on like cutting my burlap pieces and that kind of thing, because that's just the way I like to do it, I thought, oh, you know, this is about the same size as one of those fabric books that I made. So I went in the living room, I got the fabric books that were sitting on the coffee table. This is one of them. And I brought it in the other room, and I thought to myself, wouldn't those pages look nice in this cover? And lo and behold, they fit perfectly. It's kismet. It was meant to be all along. So now I can do a flip through of this because it's finished. So I took the pages out of this, which were just blank. I had just done blank pages like this. That's what I had put in here, and it had just ended up on the coffee table. And this is that, it's white, all different colors of white stuff, and it has a some, you know, fabric on the inside. It's entirely fabric, the cover is, but it does have some interfacing in it, so that's why it's a little bit stiffer. So I can do a flip through for you. I'm so happy with the way this turned out now. So thank you to Kelly may-krenz for this really cool course, which kind of gave me permission to combine some of the things that I know how to do in ways that I had never thought of combining them. So these are the pages that I made in the class. There's a lot of gold on them, so I'm hoping that there's not too bad of a reflection. So I originally made some other pages, but this is kind of what I narrowed it down to. This was my original first page, and it had some other stuff on it. Even though I followed Kelly May, I keep calling her, I want to call her Kelly May, even though I followed Kelly's class, as I went through the projects, I adapted them to the way what made me happy. You know, and I don't want to give away her secrets. You need to take her class to learn her methods, but there's some perfectionist kind of things, you know, like stitches showing through on the other side of the pages and stuff like that, that I would love to be able to embrace, but I'm just not there yet. So I started doing my pages a little bit different because I didn't necessarily want the stitching from one side to show up on the other side, and so I kind of constructed things differently. The cover and the binding itself is completely different than, well, hers are hinged in a way, but they're not. Anyway, this is what I ended up with on my first page. I had done this bit of stitching on here to this page, and you'll notice at first I have this little watercolor rose, and this is the original little watercolor rose, and I did this on a page with quite a few other little watercolor flowers, and this is the only one that I thought turned out decent. So I cut it out and I stuck it over on my desk, kind of by my computer. And so I thought, oh, I should use that in my journal But you know how I was talking about how I hoard these precious things and don't use them. So I ended up making a copy of it. And the original is on ivory paper, so I printed it on ivory paper. So I made a copy of it, and I sewed a copy of it onto my book. And you see it's like stitched down there. So I just was not loving this first page. And when I decided to redo my first page, I decided to use the original. So I glued the original little watercolor rose into my book, and I love it. This lace is, oh, let me see if I have the picture. This lace is a piece of leftover lace from a dress that I made my daughter. I don't know if this was kindergarten or, the frame's kind of dusty. I don't remember if this was kindergarten or first grade, but I made my daughter this dress, and it has lace all over it, and it's got all these roses and whatnot, and this is a piece of that lace that I put in here. Don't want to tell you about all the... Okay, so, you know I told you, if you watched the last video, you know I'd been feeling really introspective and thinking about things and stuff like that, and watching Kelly's class, and I think part of what I'm trying to say that I'm not very poetic. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say about how, you know, I don't put things about the way that my heart feels or something in my journal. But with this, making this, I was feeling like it was very pointless in a way. You know, I mean, it's just a kind of an art piece. But then I thought, you know, the journey, getting to this point is the destination. So I'm sure that's already a saying, but I just put it in there. The journey is the destination. So the point of this book isn't necessarily the finished product. The point was getting here. The journey that it took to get here, putting all this together. So in Kelly's class, she has you make some things she calls her spirit warriors. This is the kind of thing that I am not very good at, but I went with it, and I'm glad I did. This is the second one I made, and it of course has a little more Melanie flair. She has a collar, you know, as a fashion design person, I can't not let her have a collar and some interesting things on her garment there. So once I had this spirit warrior in here, it made me think of a poem that a friend of mine wrote about me when we were in high school. And it's a brilliant poem. I mean, he is, I'm sure, I don't know if he still does poetry, but he's an amazing poet for, you know, 17 years old or whatever we were at the time. And anyway, he wrote this poem about me because back in high school, I was very into the whole save the planet. I was really upset in high school, and I still am, but I was really upset about rainforest deforestation in the rainforest and how they displace species and, you know, all that kind of stuff. That was a big thing for me in high school, and I still feel that way. But anyway, the name of the poem was called Earth Tone Maiden, and so when I made this little spirit warrior, that's what she made me think of, was the Earth Tone Maiden poem. So I found some pages from a really pretty children's book, and I loved how the book, the page that I chose that had all this green stuff on it, which is where I wanted to go with it, it has a a stamp, an impression on it that says Fort Worth Public Library. So I love that, and I actually cut out around it and left it. So there's that. These are some cool kind of things Kelly has you make in her class, and then the pages are just sort of collaged. This is the first of the little pockets that I made, and I decided to put secrets on it. There really aren't any secrets in it. I had debated putting this picture of myself in this journal, perhaps in black and white or whatnot. That's me in kindergarten. Check out that shirt. I love it. I wish I had that shirt. So I just ended up sticking that little picture of me from kindergarten, and then this is a teeny tiny copy of the poem that I took lines from and put in this book. And this, I just scanned the poem that he had printed for me on a dot matrix printer, and I just printed it on some nice, or some, like recycled looking paper. So I just stuck both of those things in there. That way I have a full copy of the poem in here, and then I'm not sure what about the picture, but anyway, this page kind of turned into kind of an ode to the fact that I love to sew. This particular piece of paper right here came from a sewing book, and I think, I mostly covered it up, but I think this was a chart of interfacings maybe, because it says medium weight suits, coats, dry clean only, it's got things like that. So that made me think about sewing and that kind of thing. So this was kind of inspired. This is from one of those garments that I got at the thrift shop for 25 cents. And then both of these are pieces of those baby dresses that the post office destroyed. And I never did go back to the post office, and I figured I'm going to cut them up anyway, so I didn't want to deal with it. This part, this is one of those, it's a paper doll, the kind that it has holes in it. It's the kind that you would lace onto the doll itself. I think they're from the 50s, maybe the 60s. But I just love this little dress. So I laced it onto the page, and then I put a little piece of a slip behind it, and then it's got little French knots all around it to kind of mimic the polka dots that I have here, and then there's polka dots here, and then there's the polka dots on this Swiss dot fabric. And then, totally unrelated, I had made this with tissue paper dots while I was making the book pages. So that kind of turned into my page about sewing. This page, this image is, this is my self-portrait, and I cannot remember the artist. You guys might remember, but it was one of those things, when you take one of those online courses that has like multiple instructors or that kind of thing, and it was one of those, and I cannot remember the artist's name, but she kind of went through she went through drawing stuff, and I made my self-portrait. Well, the actual picture of this is much larger, but I thought with the colors that I had going on, I really thought it would look cool in here. So I scanned it and reduced it down so that I could put it in here, because the original, her head is like this big. And then, because I've always wanted to have a tiara, I gave her a little crown made out of some like Battenberg looking lace. So she's there. And incidentally, I sent my daughter some pictures of this book last week, and she freaked out because she thought that I had cut up my original, it's actually pastel, this drawing. And I was like, no, it's just a copy, because she loves this thing. This side of the page just kind of evolved, and I had the idea for I had used these blue, mostly blue fabric scraps. I'm not sure. That was on there before from the collage background stage of making this paper. But I had the idea for the feather because I have a little jar of feathers up on the side here. I had the idea for the feather because of something that I put further back in here. But I found this blue jay feather on the ground in my yard, and so I put it in there. This is it's a little knitted medallion kind of thing, and I was making these for a while out of different things, and you may have seen them on Pinterest or that kind of, but it's like a brooch. So you would make this and then put a pin, you know, a catch on the back of it, and then you'd wear it like a medallion or a medal. This one in particular has a dragonfly, and then when I put it in the book, I decided it needed something up above, so I just stuck a piece of this really pretty vintage grosgrain ribbon on there to kind of give it some extra texture and stuff like that. And this page has some iridescent pearl paint, and then it has all these cross stitches down the side. So there's a lot of texture here that you probably can't necessarily see on the camera. This is a line from that poem that my friend wrote, and this is just some scraps. This is one of my favorite quilt scraps, and I went ahead and put it in there. This is my attempt at trying to be poetic, because this was the evening after I talked to my husband when he talked about writing your song. Anyway, that's in here. I put that in here. The rest of it, there's just some lace, and there's some French knots on this. Those aren't French knots. I don't know. Those are beads. Some beads on this envelope, and some just little lace pieces and stuff like that. This side, another line from that poem, and I have a few of these gold pieces of lace that I've cut apart, and so I thought that looked pretty on there. And this green heart, I bought one time at an antique mall. I bought a set of like 10 hearts that were cut out from old quilts. This page is not finished, and I was working on it. I had something on here, and then I decided to change it out. But it's got all of these red stitches, so I eventually ended up putting a strip of this old quilt on there. I love the layers of paper, painted paper, you know, that are stitched on. So I couldn't decide what to put on there, and I found these little bits and pieces of things, and I stitched those on. And so I'm still waiting. I'm going to find or create, or I'll know it when I find it, whatever it is that needs to go right here. You know, maybe it's this page already has text on it. It has some lines from that poem. So, but you know, maybe it's something, not this black and white one, but maybe it's something like that, or you know, it's something like that. But definitely there needs to be something there, and I'm not sure. I hadn't found it yet, so I'll know it when I see it. This little guy, this little textile collage piece is something that I did because I just sit around and do this kind of stuff. I'm not sure what I was going to do with it. These are the kind of things that I make and then they just sit and I don't do anything with them. So I decided to attach it into the book. So it's just a bunch of stitching and beading and some old pieces and stuff like that. I made this when I was working on these book covers. And then here's my other spirit warrior. There she is. And she has a book text background. And I drew some little flowers on her, and then I found some text from a book that says, "Let us be like bluebirds." So I painted a little bluebird, kind of hard to see. Painted a little bluebird and put it on the side. I gave her a pretty little halo of blue, and then eventually she got a crown too. She has a 2-layered ruffled silk skirt with a little bit of beading on it. a beautiful little collar. I had originally drawn a leaf on her head here, but my mom crocheted me this really cute wreath that has roses and flowers on it, and all of the leaves are green or gold. And she'd given me some extras, so I thought, oh my goodness, that's perfect. So I just glued that little crochet leaf over the leaf that I had drawn on there. This page is just, I have a basket of vintage quilt scraps, and I was gonna kind of try to start with something, and I cut this circle out, and then I found this that fit, and then I just started stitching on it, and it kind of turned into something. I'm not sure what it is, but I like it. Then there's this page. This is just some vintage fabric scraps and stuff stitched on there. This page, this is another, you know, like I told you, I just sit around and do stuff. This page is, I kept seeing that wattle and loop kit, slow stitch kit on Instagram, and so I went to the website, and I thought, oh my goodness, the kit is expensive. For me, it seemed really expensive. I thought, oh, I could do that. So I decided to make my own version of it, and that's what this is. The one that comes in their kit has yellow flowers, and I don't even know if it's the right size or the right whatever. I just had fun making my version of it. And so that was another original stitching thing that I decided just to go ahead and I stitched it into the book itself. This little girl, I was drawing the other day some, actually the originals are on watercolor paper. I was drawing some of these little girls, copying them from a book, from a book from the 60s. And so I did them on watercolor paper, and I cut this one out, tried cutting her out of watercolor paper, but it's really heavy paper and it did not look good at all. So I made a copy of her and on a thinner paper, and then put her in the journal. And at first I thought, I already had this, and I had written she believed she could, and so she did. I had already written it out and put it on this page, and I was waiting for something to put here. This part of this, the style of this, you know, little watercolor drawing, to me, she doesn't necessarily fit with the Spirit Warriors, but you know what? It's my book, so I can do whatever I want, and that's exactly what I did. So I stuck her in here. And then I kind of, because I had all of these other lines from the poem in here that I had typed out on my typewriter and cut out, I decided I liked it better to be typed. So I just typed it and then cut it and glued it over where I had written that. And then this is just a little note where this morning, because I was so excited about the marriage of these book pages with this cover and how they just completely seem to be made for one another. I mean, it fits perfectly. The spine's the right size, everything about it. Just, it was totally meant to be. So that's my book pages from the Kelly may-krenz class. So once I took the pages out of this book, the blank pages, then I had this journal left over, and I did have a suggestion, which I thought was really good, to take the back of this off and make it a more manageable size by like folding it here and make this the cover, and then this would end up on the back. My only issue with that is that my favorite part of this, and you probably wouldn't, my favorite part of this cover is this, and that's because both of these pieces are from a vintage quilt that I got that's completely torn up. I mean, it's so far beyond usable, but the fabrics are so pretty. And this is a beautiful red and, you know, with blue flowers on it. And this is a part of the binding. And then this came from the same quilt. And I love these old quilts because sometimes, you know, you can take them apart and then see what color the fabric was originally. But I just love this piece because I found some place to put this piece of quilt that I'd been hanging on to for so long. So I took the pages that were in this. I made a few extras because I didn't quite have enough, and I put those in this journal. So now this journal, which is actually, let's see, how big is this cover? This cover is like 11 by 10, and then the pages are more like 8 by 10 and 8 by 10, 8 by 10 and a half. So here's the finished journal that's ready for me to use it for something. I stitched, I had a doily. I have 2 of these doilies, and I actually thought I was using this one, which I had starched like crazy because I was going to put it, fold it into the pages in this book and use it in this book, but I didn't end up using it. But I thought, oh, that would make a great pocket. So I had sewn this piece of linen over, you can kind of see all those dark marks in there. That's the back side of the stitching from the front cover. So I stitched this linen over it, and then I went ahead and put this little pocket on. Let's see, find something to put in it, so that if I wanted to, I could, you know, put things in this pocket, because this journal doesn't have any. It has a couple of envelopes, I think, but for the most part. So I stitched this in as a pocket, and then these are just, for the most part, blank pages. There's those music pages are in there, but when I get to them, I'll probably just paint over them. So that's how this guy turned out, and I love them. Oh, I'm telling you, pure kismet that these pages fit in this book perfectly, you know. And this cover was made 2 weeks before, or whatever, I ever even did this class, you know. And then they're perfect together, and I love it. I love it. So look at that, 2 journals in one day. Anyway, I'm excited about this. I haven't exactly decided what I might want to do in it, but I do have an idea of what I might want to do in here, and I will probably share it with you in the next video. So I hope you guys are doing well, and that maybe you found something inspiring. And take care, stay well, wash your hands, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.